Thanks all for being here. Let me start by quickly introducing myself a little bit more. Like any good engineer, I came from the Delft University of Technology, just promoting that a bit. But after my studies, I actually ended up in software engineering, did a lot of different things from programming all kinds of embedded systems to big websites and basically anything that was somewhat running on a processor I was involved in. Did a lot of different projects, and during all that time I was also doing sim racing a lot, just as a hobby. And as that sometimes go with hobbies, they get out of hand, and mine got out of hand in a big way in 2016 when I got the opportunity to take over the development of rFactor 2. So I founded a company called Studio 397, and I guess you all have to figure out what the 397 means. There is some hidden meaning to it. Took over and sort of evolved rFactor 2 into what it is today. I think one of the most realistic racing simulations, and I'll try to back up those claims a little bit more by diving into some of the technical aspects of it. So yeah, I've been involved in sim racing myself a lot, so I'm not just the guy running the company. I also enjoy driving my own product, and in fact also driving other products as well. I don't exclusively run rFactor 2. I do check out the other sims as well. So let's get started a little bit. Just a tiny word about Studio 397. We're about 30 people big. Formerly we're from the Netherlands, but we have, as you call that nowadays, a virtual office. I would say most of our people are not in the Netherlands, but spread out over the whole world. So we really live on the internet. In fact, and this might be a bit strange for a lot of people, I probably haven't ever met more than half of the people working for me. Never met in real life. We're going to do that later this year, by the way, so that's going to be interesting. Might be a shock for some, but well, some might have seen me, but let's see. Besides rFactor 2, we do a lot of bespoke development as well for big companies in the industry. And as that goes, usually you can't say much about that. A project we did that we can talk about is the Grand Tour game for Amazon Game Studios. Like the show on TV, not a very serious simulation, but mainly focused on just having fun with cars and bad jokes about cars. It was a lot of fun for us making the game, I can tell you that. And Studio 397 is part of Luminous, which is a bigger IT company. Like I said, I grew up in software engineering, so to speak. So we're still part of a bigger company, which means we're not a typical game studio. We also have people who have knowledge in cloud computing and all kinds of stuff like that, which is interesting because it gets us in places and into projects that a traditional game company would never get into. So a little bit about rFactor 2. Well, the 2 implies there's an rFactor 1, and that's indeed the case. That started in 2005. rFactor 2 was released in first public beta in 2012. We took over 2016, so it's been on the market for quite a while, which for a game is a bit weird. Most games live for a couple of years and then they get replaced by the next best thing. We're still evolving it. Interestingly enough, both engagement and actual sales of the game are still growing year after year, so we're doing something correctly, or we did something wrong earlier, whatever you want. But yeah, we're seeing a lot of people racing competitively in our sim. We're also at the moment, I think, the only open platform and still in active development, open in the sense that we allow people to build their own tracks and build their own cars and bring them into the game, and we actually have some documentation on how to do that. I wouldn't say that makes it easy, because developing a car isn't super easy. You have to have a lot of knowledge about vehicle dynamics and stuff like that, but you can do it. So diving into that a little bit more, and not all of you have a technical background, so I'm not going to dive in too deep. But if you are building your simulation, there's two main parts of it that you need to build and that you need to hook up together. And that's on the one hand a physics system. And our physics system runs at a constant rate of 400 hertz, which is reasonably fast compared to others. And we run that at a fixed rate to make sure that when you compete against each other online, that the physics actually performs exactly the same on each computer. So buying a faster computer will not give you a competitive advantage as far as physics goes. That would be a bit stupid. Actually, another part of the physics engine runs at an even higher frequency. Our tire model, tires are spinning really, really fast in a racing car. So we've sort of made an exception and simulate them at an even higher frequency of 2400 hertz. And actually, most people will probably agree the tire model is the most important aspect of a racing simulation, and even of real racing. It's the only part of the car that touches the road. Take that away and it would just fly straight into the trees. So tires are important, the tire model is important, and we're actually basing our tire model on a physics simulation where we really build a model of the tire with all the different layers and materials that are in the real tire as well. And we run that through physics calculations. And just to give you an idea, those calculations for a single tire take roughly 24 hours. They produce a lot of data, big tables, and that data we use in the real-time simulation. And well, just from knowing that it takes 24 hours to do all of this stuff, it already shows you would never ever be able to do such a detailed model fully in real time. So we use a trick that is often used in simulation. If you can't do it fast enough, use lookup tables, interpolation to make it work that way. Other parts of this physics simulation are obviously reading the inputs, so steering input, pedals, stuff like that. There's a little bit of collision detection as well, even though you're not supposed to run into each other in a simulator. And the final part is probably the force feedback, calculating those forces on the wheel, giving them back to the driver so he can use that to better control the car. I've left out the audio part of it. That's sort of running in parallel with this as well, to give you the correct audio cues. Getting low latency audio in consumer PCs is quite a challenge, by the way. By default, it's not really that real time at all. So not always that useful, but if you buy the right hardware, you can get a lot closer to that. So that's one side, the physics side. And the other part is graphics. It runs in parallel as a separate subsystem, and usually that just runs as quickly as you can. Because that gives you the lowest latency in your whole feedback loop. Sometimes it's limited to the maximum frame rate of your monitors, and nowadays with stuff like G-Sync and FreeSync monitors, you can go quite high in frequencies, which is great for racing, because the low latency aspect is really important for us. We've developed our own graphics engine for that, because we also want to do stuff like triple screens, like you have over here, where you have 3 different viewpoints, because the screens are all at an angle. Obviously, you have support for VR as well. Very promising technology also going forward. So those are things that we really keep developing and pushing as we go along. So that's a little bit about the software aspect of it. Also want to talk a little bit about track creation. How do we actually build a track? It starts with probably the most boring aspect of track creation, which is getting a license for a track and then trying to get access to the track to get reference data. And part of that, if at all possible, is to get a laser scan of the track. So we either have a static laser or have a car driving slowly over the track. measuring each point. And in the image behind me, you see the result of that process for a well-known track in the US for Sebring. This is one of the corners of the track. And this was the data that we had after we did the scan there. So it's a lot of points, a lot of data, and it's very accurate and a good starting point for us to get going. So once we have that scan in place, we actually need to start converting that into a model that will load and render on a normal PC. The point cloud that we have from LaserScan is really too big to directly drive on unless you're a Formula One simulator and you have lots of memory and lots of computers, then you can make that work. We need to sort of simplify the model a bit to make it manageable. But still, even by simplifying it, it's still pretty accurate and you can still feel every bump as it is on the real track at that moment in time. So this is the first phase for us. We have the point cloud and we're converting it into a mesh that you can drive on and that you can visually see. And we typically build everything up to the barrier as a first step. Everything up to the barrier, that's basically the whole drivable area of the track. And once we have that, we can already start testing. It might be hard for people to drive the track because they lack a lot of visual references, but you can drive the track and it can already be a lot of fun doing it like that. The second part of the process, that's usually the biggest part for us. That's actually going beyond the barrier and building the whole terrain around it, especially when doing tracks in really busy areas or street tracks. There's a lot of stuff to do there. Luckily, that's also a process that you can parallelize a lot. What we literally do is we take a Google map, we stick numbers on all the different objects that we find around the track, and we dish them out to a group of modelers, and they start building those models. We do need to always keep in mind that we don't have unlimited budgets in terms of polygons, so we keep track of how far away a certain object is from the track. Is it close by? And we'll add a lot more detail to it than when it's just something that's in the background. So that takes us quite some time to get all of that stuff in. And then as a final step, we're usually training the AI, adding the ambient sounds to the track and stuff like that, just to really recreate the atmosphere of such a place. Yeah, I just had some more examples of tracks. This is the pit lane of the Nürburgring. Some of you might recognize it. So I see some people nodding here. So I guess we did a good job on reproducing that. Here you see some of the detail that we typically add to stuff that's really close by. This is another example, Sebring. And if you know Sebring and you know the 12-hour race that's been held there every year, there's many fans coming to the track, bringing their trailers, just camping there for the whole weekend. So it's one big party, and as far as you can see, there's people camping and having a good time. So we really wanted to make sure that in our version of that track, we also captured that atmosphere of such an event. So yeah, this is a good example of where we had to model a lot of stuff around the track to really get that atmosphere going. And this is a close-up shot of some of the tarmac. I think this is also from Sebring. And it shows the detail we go into when really reproducing the curbs and the lines on the track with all the cracks in it and stuff. And really, well, normally if you're zooming past it with 200 kilometers per hour, you don't really notice all of this stuff. But yeah, some of the users also zoom in on stuff and they want to see if it's really real. So this shows a nice image of how real it gets, even if you zoom into stuff in the simulator. So the other thing we do a lot is simulating cars, and process is kind of similar to building a track, but the whole physics aspect is really an enhancement. Modeling usually starts with a 3D CAD model. Sometimes people do that with a laser scan. We typically just take the CAD models that we get from the manufacturers as a starting point. And for some old cars, we even use technologies like photogrammetry, if we have images of the car, but it doesn't exist anymore in real life. Photogrammetry has become quite a good way of at least capturing the base model, and then we do another pass over it to make it really smooth and nice. So that's modeling, and yeah, how do you split up modeling a car? There's not that much you can split up. We typically have one guy doing the exterior, another guy doing the interior. That's something you can divide. And then there's two other processes that are interesting. First and biggest is actually getting the whole physics of the car done. And like I said, we are an open simulation, so we have ways for community members to also do this. And we actually share a very large spreadsheet with all the data that you can possibly think about for modeling a car. And that is our starting point as well for doing a car model. We then have to just do a lot of research. Typically nowadays we work with manufacturers, get a lot of data on the cars, get a lot of telemetry, and feed all of that data into that sheet that converts into a physics model, and that is actually what we use to drive the car. And in the image you see on the screen, we are actually validating a tire model we made. Like I said, we really model the tire as it's manufactured in real life. So every now and then we also overlay it over a real photo to just make sure that we have all the dimensions exactly correct and that the shape of the tire is correct with the right tire pressure and stuff. So yeah, that seems to fit quite well in this image. This is a very iterative process because we're simulating the car, which means we never have 100% accuracy, and we can't always get all the data we want. Especially tire manufacturers are very protective of how their tires are built, so they're not too eager to share all of that stuff with us, especially when it's for racing cars. So we do have to make some educated guesses to get all of this going. So it's iterative, we test a lot, we use some real drivers and some real fast simulator drivers to validate the models and make small corrections. And in the end, that gets us quite close to the real car in a lot of cases. So we're quite happy about that. And like I said, we do that through collaborating a lot with manufacturers. The car you see here is a LMP3 car, a Norma, and we've worked a lot with one of the teams that is running or was running this car, Duquesne Engineering in France. They gave us access to the car, they have a test track, and they have a simulator themselves as well, which incidentally was also running rFactor 2. So we really collaborate with them to make sure that the car is as close as we can get to the real one we have. And in recent years we see those collaborations getting stronger. People have more interest in sim racing. So instead of having to call them up and ask for collaborations, they start calling us nowadays. So that's a nice change, and that's really the way forward, I think. So might be running out of time a bit, so I'll keep it short on this one. Another thing we're working on extensively, and this is more a IT thing, is we're completely revamping our user interface, and we're adding an online competition system that will help us do esports and facilitate also others doing esports. We're completely rebuilding the whole interface using web technologies. When we got the software, it was on a really old-fashioned interface, which really wasn't too easy to manage for anybody. So we're completely changing that now, which means it's web-based. It can also do interesting stuff like When you're driving the car, you can have somebody with a tablet logging into your system and actually monitoring what you're doing, changing the setup of the car. Obviously not while you're driving, but when you go back into the pit lane. So it opens up all kinds of interesting new possibilities for simulation and collaboration and stuff like that. So I think that was it in terms of time, and that was my last slide. So I'd like to thank everybody. When my really last slide isn't even coming up. Yeah, no. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.
Well, there must be any questions. Are there any questions? Yeah?
Do you need licenses for all the parts of a car from these manufacturers?
Do we need licenses for all the parts? Not for all the parts. I mean, literally every car, for example, has all kinds of electronics by Bosch and companies like that. We typically don't need licenses for those. On the other hand, if they're visible in the cockpit, we typically don't show the logos if we're not sure about that. For cars like LMP3 cars, who are usually built and assembled out of a lot of different technologies, you sometimes do end up having to license from 2 or 3 partial manufacturers. Another example is a GT car that we did, a GT3 car, a Callaway Corvette, which is licensed from GM because it's a Corvette, and licensed from Callaway because they are the German company building that specific version of the car. So yeah, it's sometimes it's multiple licenses that you need. Most of the times we can get away with a single license for a car and a single license for a track. But yeah, we can probably fill a whole talk about licensing and problems around that and all kinds of stuff. But we'll save that for
Next
a legal
year.
session. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? I can't see it. No.
One question over here.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So when we're modeling the track, do we also need to model the lighting and maybe other weather conditions of the track? Well, it's definitely very important when we try to laser scan a track, because you can't laser scan at night and you can't laser scan when the track is wet or when it's raining. So for actually getting an accurate scan, we need to have good weather conditions. Same goes for creating reference images. If you're into photography, you will know that probably the sun is your enemy and shadows are your enemy. So if you want to get good references and good textures, you want to have an overcast day and do it that way. When it comes to simulating all these different weather conditions and sun conditions and stuff like that in the sim, that's another aspect of our graphical model that we spend a lot of time on. We actually place the tracks on the correct location on the Earth, so we have the right sun and moon movement. We actually have star systems in rFactor 2 that are correct for the time of day and the time of year. So again, while most people won't even notice that normally, we do try to keep that as accurate as possible. So that's a whole simulation in itself, yeah. And it does matter because, well, people know, for example, Sebring, because of the great sunset and the atmosphere that gives. If you have the sun going down in the wrong corner of the track, that will be kind of weird. So, yeah.
Thank you. And can I ask your opinion? What comes up in your mind when you think of the biggest impact for today's society, culture, or politics?
Oh yeah, I don't do politics, so I'm going to skip that. But impact on society, I think it's great that we're learning more about our environment. And we've been talking a lot about real racing versus simulators. And I agree we shouldn't be stuck in the simulated world. But what these things teach us a lot is they give us a better understanding of our world. And by modeling it, we learn more about the world, and we learn also better ways of sustaining our world, I think. And that's, I think, what science in general does. And I think sim racing might also be a small help in that. I see one person raising his hand in the back as well. So repeating the question and trying to shorten it a bit, are we investing more time and effort in a good physical model of rainy conditions and how tires respond to that? I'll be brutally honest about that. We have a model of rain and grip in the rain in rFactor 2. It's far from perfect yet, because even though we have a track model that keeps track of where people have driven, where there's rubber on the track because of that, where there are marbles on the track, and when it starts raining, we also keep track of the water depth on each individual part of the track. So we know the mix between rubber, between marbles, and between water. What we're still improving is how that exactly affects grip, because as most people who have either driven in the rain competitively or watched that racing on TV know, the ideal line in the dry is probably the worst line in the wet, especially if there's a lot of rubber, because it gets very slippery, so you try to avoid that line. We're still working on getting that balance good. And as we're getting more feedback from real drivers, I think that's something we'll keep improving over the next couple of years to make sure that we match that experience more closely in the future. Do we have time for more questions?
What is the time? No?
No,
Okay.
I'm afraid I'll be here, so I'll answer more questions
exactly,
offline. Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you. Give a warm applause.
Thank you.